Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. The 5 stages of becoming a prepper. In the movie The Matrix, Neo had to come to terms with the fact that the world that he thought was real for the longest time wasn't. It was artificial. In the same way, everyone is going to have an epiphany at some point that they're wholly dependent on the system. And the deeper you are into the system, the more dependent you are on it. The higher you live in a high-rise building in a densely populated environment, the more you are dependent wholly on the supply chain. Whereas somebody who lives in a rural environment is dependent less so, albeit still dependent. You're always going to be grid dependent to a certain extent or another. Now, I want to talk about the 5 stages of grief, the 5 stages of becoming a prepper and coming to terms with the reality. And I don't want to overuse the Matrix metaphor, which has been beleaguered by one Andrew Tate.
The Matrix.
The Matrix. The Matrix.
Matrix is trying to frame me, but God knows the truth.
But it's very pertinent here to preparedness. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Everybody goes through these 5 stages. Now, this is largely meant to pertain to when you lose something in life. Somebody dies. First, you're going to deny it. This can't be happening. Then you're going to get mad. You're going to start cursing the heavens. Then you're going to be bargaining. You know, if only I would have done this. Maybe I'm just dreaming. Maybe this is hallucination. This can't be real. Then you're going to come to terms with it in the sense that you're going to be depressed. You're going to realize that this is an enduring reality. This is how the world is now, and you have to cope with it. And then ultimately you're going to have to accept that reality before you can actually move on. And this whole process is debilitating mentally, physically, and the faster you progress through these stages, the better off you're going to be. When you first get encountered with the reality that something is wrong with the world, in the sense that you realize that the supply chain that we've created, which has brought us all kinds of luxuries and has increased the standard of living. You can take a person who lives in abject poverty in the Western world, and they are still better off than the richest people who lived hundreds of years ago in terms of their ability to use a phone that can connect with anybody on the planet, that can access any piece of information. Just the simple fact that we have antibiotics and dying from an infection that might have killed a king of yesteryear is no longer a problem. All of these things were not there a long time ago. So by virtue of that alone, our standard of living has drastically increased. Nonetheless, we find ourselves at the whim of technology. I shared a tweet last night. It was a meme showing a picture of a wolf when the caption read, "I wonder if I should go join those humans by the fire." Below that was a picture of a pug in whatever people dress their pugs in, and it said 10,000 years later, right? Because all dogs are derived from wolves, and ultimately we've become that pug. We used to be wild. We used to have survival skills. We used to be able to weather the elements with just the skin on our backs. Now we are that highly domesticated pug, which is wholly dependent on this elaborate supply chain that could collapse at any point in time. You're going to have that epiphany at some point that the world is messed up, it's not going to get better, and ultimately you're going to have to fend for yourself. Now, usually when people unconsciously acknowledge that point, they immediately deny it because it requires a holistic lifestyle transformation that is a massive commitment. If you look at any prepper who's been doing this for 20 years, they got their off-grid retreat, they got their rain catchment system, they got their aquaponics and their permaculture setup and their garden and their orchard and their greenhouse and their chickens and all the heavy equipment and their storage of diesel and emergency food supply, bullets, guns, ammo, medicine, all that stuff. And you're looking at that and you're living in an apartment building in shared accommodation in a high-rise building in the most densely populated place on earth, and the only means you have to defend yourself is a few butter knives. You're looking at that situation and you're like, man, this is something that is insurmountable. I cannot possibly ever achieve that level of readiness, so I have to rationalize my situation by railing against this and denying that there's a problem in the first place. And so people who aren't prepared and don't have the means to prepare need to deny this reality that the just-in-time delivery system isn't resilient and is frail and is subject to a precipitous collapse. Because if they don't, then they have to change their lifestyle. Unconsciously, everybody knows what I'm talking about. But most people are in denial because if they were to acknowledge it, then they would have to do something about it. And doing something about it involves a massive lifestyle transformation that most people don't want to commit to. So most people stay in denial until it's too late. It's easier to just deny that there's a problem, even if you're faced with all the facts. And I know this because I was that person. I was that person who knew that there was a problem, but instead of wanting to change my habits, instead of wanting to exercise the discipline required to make the fundamental changes that needed to happen in order for me to move into a lifestyle of preparedness, I was very reluctant, and I rationalized it every way from Sunday why this is stupid. Preppers are dumb. Preppers are conspiracy theorists. Preppers are crazy. This is never going to happen. And even if it does, well, I wouldn't want to live through that anyways because X, Y, and Z. The fact is, you'll want to live even when shit hits the fan. You are going to cling to life. Regardless of whether you think that you don't want to survive in that world right now, you're probably going to survive, and you're going to want to continue to survive, and you'll be kicking yourself that you didn't prepare more. So overcoming denial is a big thing. The majority of people won't even have the epiphany I'm talking about. And remember, the epiphany is first unconscious. Like Neo, who knew something was wrong, that there was something fundamentally wrong with the world that he was in, but he could just not put his finger on it. Until Trinity, lots of religious subtext there, presented itself and showed Neo, the new son of man, Neo Anderson, the way, and that he was the one. And really, all the Matrix is, if you guys don't realize it yet, is just the Christ story repackaged. Neo is supposed to be Christ, and he, in fact, rises from the dead at some point and saves the human race. But most people will never get to that point where they have that unconscious epiphany. But when you first have it, immediately the knee-jerk reaction is going to be denial. This can't be happening. Now, there's a certain degree of skepticism that is healthy. You want to be skeptical. You don't want to just immediately succumb to any dreadful idea like this, because of course that's a sign of a weak mind as well. But some people are incredulous and sustain that level of disbelief far longer than is healthy. Let's just say you reach a point where you acknowledge, okay, this is a problem and I need to do something about it, but. There's still a lot of buts. Let me give you some insight into my journey into becoming a prepper, okay? You initially start out realizing, okay, society's f***ed and it's only gonna get worse. And then you start looking into survival videos. Let's just say your own algorithm will steer you in that direction of seeking out more information, even if only in an attempt to repudiate it so you can reaffirm your old worldview. And so in doing so, you're going to find yourself going on various YouTube videos and trying to learn about how to survive. And you're going to start off on the level of where you're at, which is going to be very rudimentary, because remember, you don't even have a bug out bag at this point. You don't even own a knife to go and survive, right? So your first order of the day is, okay, now that I've realized that there's a problem, I'm no longer in denial. Now I got to go out and try to actually do something about it. That's going to be ridden with anger in a lot of ways, because you're likely going to have the knee-jerk reaction to rail against those people who are trying to tell you that something is wrong and trying to show you how to live that life, because again, you're still reluctant to accept that this is your new reality. So whilst you might be starting to seek out information, there's going to be like this hostility, because you realize that should it go down today, these people are going to be far better off than you. So you still have to kind of rationalize your inadequacy when it comes to surviving a precarious grid down situation. So you're going to go and you're going to write nasty comments. Well, you don't need all that to survive. You just need your bug out bag. Anybody who needs more than a knife and raw wilderness bushcraft survival skills is not a true survivalist, and you're just a hoarder. And so you're going to go through this phase where you're kind of angry at preppers, even though you acknowledge there's a problem and you overcome denial. Then you're going to get to the point where you're in this bargaining phase. This is not a static environment. You can go in between denial, anger, acceptance, depression, and you can jump around. It's not like you get to the next stage and you're there. So in the bargaining phase, this is when you try to rationalize your position. Well, I understand the importance of a homestead, but then you're going to be far from, the city, and you're going to be thinking of all the cons of what that life entails. I could store a bunch of food, but then I would be taking more than I'm entitled to as a human being, and I'd be a bad person for doing so, because most people only have a month's worth of food in their home, or just struggling to get by. And so you'll be in denial to a certain extent about the extent of your preparedness endeavors. And then you'll reach a point of depression right before you capitulate, where you acknowledge that not only is it a problem, I'm wholly unprepared. The preppers were right, although there are some unhinged batshit crazy preppers, don't get me wrong. But the depression comes in the acknowledgement that I was wrong, and now I fundamentally need to change. And so that's when you transcend the level of acceptance, and you openly start to embrace preparedness in a holistic sense. And it's at that point when you cease being hostile towards preppers, and in fact, you now have become a prepper, and those up-and-coming preppers are hostile towards you. So if you go back to the Matrix metaphor, once you've emerged out of the Matrix, coming out of the Matrix, and once he comes to terms with all of that, then the machines want to kill him, and all of the agents and all of the people who want to believe that the Matrix is real want to kill Neo. Many of them, they don't want to change. I mean, even what was the guy's name? Cypher was okay living in the Matrix, despite knowing how wholly dependent he was on that system. Despite being a slave to the system, he was okay with that, because he would rather eat fake cuisine than real slop. There's a great metaphor in there too with respect to horticultural food supply. It's arguable that all of the preservatives and all the chemicals and stuff that goes into processed food make it taste a lot better than what you're going to be able to create at a homestead, but it's not going to be as nourishing on a cellular level in terms of the nutrients it provides you. So those are the 5 stages that one must overcome. And ultimately, this is why I don't get mad and I don't argue with people in the comments anymore who come on and write nasty negative comments, because I understand that they're just in the first part of the process, and that in 5 years they're going to be where I am and they're going to realize the error of their ways, and they're going to reflect on that period of time. You know what it's like? We have cats on the farm, and we had a female cat, and we got some kittens because we wanted more cats to keep all the gophers and the mice down, and boy, they're doing a good job of that. But when a batch of kittens gets introduced to another female cat, the kittens will instinctively be very aggressive towards that female cat. When you're a kitten, your only defense is being really aggressive in the face of another animal or creature. You have to be just viciously aggressive. Now the female cats, they're not aggressive back to the kittens. It's like they intuitively understand this mechanism that the kittens are displaying in being just vociferously savage, and I'm talking violent, within a day, those kittens will be nestled up to that female cat trying to suckle the teat. And the female cat is not aggressive in return. They don't reciprocate that energy. In fact, they have this very calm demeanor. It's really remarkable to see. They allow the kitten to do its thing, to get all its anger and rage out of the system, right? People are going to lash out against you as a result of the lifestyle path you've chosen, because they view it as something that's unachievable, when it's absolutely achievable for everybody who commits. But you have to really have a 10-year plan. To be brutally honest, if you want to live the macro lifestyle, it could happen a lot sooner for a lot of people, depending on your level of resourcefulness. And obviously, If you're somebody who's established more financial capital over the years, then you're going to be in a better position than somebody who is young. Add on the rebelliousness of youth. A lot of people, when they have this epiphany when they're young, they're going to be doubly resistant to change. Whereas a person who's older, who's been around, who's seen the ebbs and flows of things is probably going to be slightly less resistant. So if you find yourself in your mid-20s and you acknowledge that things are weird and you think they're going to get weirder, but you don't think it's a problem you can overcome, you just have to start where you're at. And this is the paradox, okay? This is a very interesting thing to think about. The stronger the resistance to prepping at the start, the stronger you are going to be a prepper. You will be a more hardcore prepper if you're more resistant to change. When I used to work with addicts, I found that the people who were the most hardcore addicts, like the guys who would just blow an 8-ball in an hour, or whatever, whatever crazy amount of drugs is considered extreme, the more hardcore the addict, the more hardcore the recovery. And those guys were the ones who ultimately became the leaders in the recovery space. There's that old saying, how you do anything is how you do everything. If you go hard as an addict, you're going to go hard in recovery. And the same thing is true with prepping. The more hardcore you are in your resistance, the more hardcore of a prepper ye shall be. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.